How the Normans changed the history of Europe. In 1066, a force of 7,000 Norman soldiers crossed the English Channel on warships with the intention of invading England, a kingdom that at the time had a population of more than 1 million people. Both infantry and knights were included in the population of Norman soldiers. It turned out that this adventure ended up having enormous repercussions, despite the fact that it was only a brief trip. In addition, other groups of Normans embarked on separate expeditions around Europe at the same time, which ultimately had an impact on the history of the continent. In the middle of a broad migration of Scandinavians across Europe, the origins of these warriors may be traced back to a period of time that went back more than 2 centuries, to the time when Vikings first started arriving in northern France. This migration occurred during the time when the Vikings were first arriving in France. In the year 911, they were eventually successful in negotiating peace with the Frankish king, Charles, which enabled them to acquire an area along the northern coast of France that would later be recognized as Normandy. This region was then referred to as Normandy. According to the locals, the reason they were referred to as Normans was due to the direction in which they arrived. This was claimed by the neighborhood residents. Even though they intermarried with women from the Frankish culture, adopted the French language, and converted to Christianity, the Normans continued to follow the military traditions and conquering mindset of their Viking predecessors. This was the case despite the fact that they adopted the French language. In spite of the fact that they had adapted to their new environment, this was the outcome that occurred. With the passage of time, ambitious Norman knights sought out fresh conquests, with the conquest of England being their greatest remarkable triumph to this point in time. Having said that, the Normans were successful in capturing England. In the year 1066, William, Duke of Normandy, cast doubt on the legitimacy of Harold Godwinson, who had just been formally anointed King of England. Godwinson had just been crowned King of England shortly before. At that moment, Godwinson had just been crowned the monarch of England. The meeting that took place in Hastings between William and his knights and Harold's army occurred around the same time that William and his knights arrived in England. The Bay of Tapestry depicts the decisive fight scenario, which shows Harold getting shot in the eye by an arrow. This is the most important scene of the conflict. Featured prominently on the tapestry is this particular sign, which serves as a representation of the Norman conquest. Following his victory, William strengthened his grip on power by constructing a large number of strongholds and reorganizing the social structure of England. This culminated in the consolidation of his control. Immediately after the conclusion of his victory, this action was carried out through the successful completion of projects such as the Domesday Book, which was a detailed census that documented the population and ownership of land across the entirety of England. He was given the title of William the Conqueror, which was bestowed upon him as a result of his accomplishments. It was during this time period that Anglo-Saxon continued to be the language of choice among commoners, while Norman French developed as the language of choice for the royal court. The combination of so many different linguistic influences that have taken place over the course of time is one of the most significant factors that has contributed to the creation of contemporary English. The fact that various terminology for cattle was employed, such as cow for Anglo-Saxon commoners and beef for Norman lords, is an example of how social differences remained to persist despite the fact that languages were blended together. This might be seen as an example of how social disparities continue to exist. Around the end of the 12th century, the Normans expanded their authority into Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, which further transformed the political landscape of the British Isles. This occurred as a result of the Normans' expansion of land. This took place during the period of time that the Norman conquest was taking place. Independent bands of Norman knights were inspired to go to the Mediterranean during the medieval period by the tales of pilgrims who had returned from Jerusalem. These tales were told by those who had traveled to Jerusalem. These knights found inspiration in the history of Jerusalem, which served as a source of motivation for them. Here, they found themselves caught up in the intricate web of wars that were taking place at the time between a number of different nations. These conflicts were taking place at this location. Due to the fact that they were considered to be particularly skilled in combat, they became immensely sought after as mercenaries whenever they were given the opportunity to do so. Their use of couched lances in huge horse attacks was a fatal strategy that completely transformed the way that warfare was conducted during the medieval period. They were the first to adopt this tactic. For the duration of the First Crusade, which took place between the years 1095 and 1099, the Normans were an important part of the battlefield. Because of their participation, This led to the reestablishment of Christian hegemony in certain regions of the Middle East, which was a direct consequence of their actions. In spite of the fact that they were successful, their influence was felt well beyond the realm of military victory. Among the leaders who were responsible for the acquisition of land in southern Italy, which finally resulted in the establishment of the Kingdom of Sicily in the year 1130, they were among those influential individuals. People like William Iron Arm and Robert the Crafty were among the leaders who were responsible for the founding of the organization. The island of Sicily prospered as a shining example of multiculturalism and tolerance under the reign of Roger II. This flourishing occurred in the middle of the theological and civic upheavals that were taking place at the time. Muslim Arab poets and philosophers served alongside Byzantine Greek sailors and architects at the royal court of the Kingdom of Sicily. This was the case during the time period. Every one of these people was making a contribution to the royal institution. This demonstrates that the kingdom is committed to providing a wide variety of services and products. Official languages in the kingdom included Arabic, Latin, Greek, and Norman French, amongst others. The monarchy also recognized a wide variety of other languages as official languages. This was a manifestation of the varied cultural traditions that were present within the kingdom where it was located. It was a thorough geographical compilation that featured maps that were unparalleled for extended periods of time. In addition to exhibiting the knowledge of the world, the Book of Roger was a compilation of maps that were unparalleled. The construction of Sicilian churches was influenced by a number of different cultures, including the Spanish, Arabs, and Byzantines. In addition to being covered with magnificent golden mosaics, these churches also have other architectural elements. In spite of the fact that they gradually became a part of the communities that they conquered, the Normans left behind a legacy that will continue to be passed down from generation to generation. The accomplishments that they have accomplished, which include the architectural marvels that can be found all around Europe, as well as the effect that the English language has had on a global scale, are still recognized to this day. In spite of the fact that the Norman identity has been diminished throughout the course of history, it is still feasible to recognize the influence that the Normans have had on a wide range of areas of culture, society, and language. An excellent illustration of the illustrious legacy that this great medieval dynasty has left behind for subsequent generations is provided by this particular instance. Thanks for watching. Subscribe the channel and hit the bell icon.